But the first one inside that door was Stephen Gerrard, and he came right up to me, and then he said, "I loved your book. I'm from Alta. Look it up. It means up high in Spanish, and it really is. It's a place where the sun never shines." I was 5 years old the first time I told my mom I was going to be an author. If you want to write literature on a higher level, you've got to have a sharp pen. If you have an interesting story to tell, if you have an imagination to tell good stories, if you can sort of see these stories in you, you can train yourself to be a good author. Have the power of the words, and the power of the words you get from reading good writers. And they just absolutely blew me away, because they showed me that I had taken completely wrong in terms of what football is. Happy days.
We good to go? Cool. Thank you. It's exciting, this, given...
Isn't it?
How long... When did I first meet you? Was it...
Oh, so we moved here 9 years ago, so that means we've known each other probably for at least 8.
8?
Yeah. Because you were early in the process, weren't you?
Yeah, I think...
Before we had built, or...
No, yeah, because I introduced you to Terry halfway through the build.
Oh my goodness, yes. So then we've known you for,
For all that time.
for 9 years. No, 8 years.
8 years.
Yeah.
Time flies, hey?
I know.
So thanks so much for coming on, and thank you so much for that wonderful talk.
It was my pleasure. What a lovely bunch of people.
It was good, wasn't it?
Smiling towards me, not against me, but towards me. Yeah.
So we'll go through some of that shortly, and we'll cover everything. But I think for me, what I'm interested in is a bit of what it was like for you growing up. Because I'm guessing it's quite different, especially with light. So tell me what it was like for you as a little girl growing up in Norway.
So I'm from a family with 3 dark-haired people and me, and they were not only 3 dark against 1 light blonde one, it was also 3 quiet, shy, quite sort of introvert people, and this one massive entertainer. And I felt the urge and the responsibility heavily from I was little to entertain in the house, which I can still sometimes think about, when it was just so quiet. I could jump up and do like an imitation of a famous TV personality. I quickly put together a dance group because we had no dance schools, and I was desperate to become a dancer. So bear in mind, I'm from the end of the world. I'm from as far north as you get, mainland Europe. I'm from Alta. Look it up. It means up high in Spanish, and it really is. It's a place where the sun never shines. It doesn't even appear in 2 months in winter.
So is it just dark?
Yeah, well, so you have some daylight. In November and January, you get some spectacular skies, like the ones you get just before sunrise or just before sunset. You can get these flamey skies, and then we had daylight, but you wouldn't have that. The sun wouldn't come up. So the darkest day of the year is the 21st of December, and that day you have just that blue sort of twilighty light for 1 hour. And that grows into 2 hours with a dip of daylight, and then longer and longer daylight, but no sunshine. And then we celebrate when the sun come back around the 3rd week of January. And everyone is then celebrating with these sun rolls that you eat, and you have like a sun party, basically. But then again, it's payback time in summer when the sun never sets. It literally doesn't go down for 2 months. So you can go hiking in the middle of the night in summer with these warm, glowy sort of, that light just before sunset when everyone just gets so pretty. That's my favorite time to photograph people, because you get that warm, glowy kind of sunshine. We have that all night, every night, all summer.
Does it affect your mood?
Yes.
Does it?
Oh, yes. So a lot of people, that far north need to have artificial like sunshine in lamps. We call them like sun lamps, because people get depressed. I think unfortunately the suicide rate is not nice.
No.
For me it was just too dark and too cold to continue living there. A lot of my friends, we were all adventurers, moving away, getting our university degrees, falling in love, getting some cool job somewhere. But a lot of them, actually the majority of them, even though they went to crazy places, settling down like Hawaii and Oslo, the capital, and all sorts of places, the majority of them at some point came home. When they had children, they wanted to be close to their grandparents and aunties and uncles. It's just one of those anchoring feelings, isn't it? That I feel immensely in Liverpool as well, because Liverpool is like home to me. It's got a lot of the same sort of values and the same kind of people as the people of the north of Norway. Direct humor is a great source of survival. People who have gone through a lot, been through a lot, been tested a lot, and then we have each other. So I think that's probably why I feel so home in Liverpool, because it's got a lot of the same sort of mentality. We stick together, we battle together, we look out for each other, we want the best for each other. And quite similar to north of Norway as well is that proud hospitality gene. In Liverpool, when you make a friend, and I felt that straight away when I came to do some journalism and working on my books. People can't do enough for you. They really want to show you around, help you out, invite you home for dinner, buy you a pint, Yeah. You feel so welcome. And it's the same in Alta in the north of Norway, where I'm from, where you haven't got a lot, you just have each other, because you don't have tons of theatres and huge music scenes and what have you not, which you do have in Liverpool, by the way. But you don't have a lot going on. You have sports and you have each other. So when you have visitors, you welcome them in, you open your home, they can stay for as long as they like. That's a little bit kind of similar between the north of Norway and Norway in general, but specifically north of Norway and Liverpool. So that's why it's easy to become a Scouswegian.
Scouswegian. So obviously as a young girl, it was just a dancer, or was it more of a performer, entertainer, or did you just wanted to be?
It's so interesting, because when I wrote my first book and that was published in 2010, I decided to have the launch in Alta, where I'm from. I hadn't lived there for half a life. But I just thought, everything happens in the big cities. I'm just going to make this book rock Alta. So I brought with me Roy Evans, one of my greatest supporters in writing that Liverpool Football Club book, and Vegard Heggem, a Norwegian former player. Oh, yeah. And we went to Alta, and I had a live interview with the Norwegian BBC, NRK it's called, on the veranda in my childhood home with my mom. And that's when my mom said to the radio presenter that I was 5 years old the first time I told my mom I was going to be an author. 5 years old. And then this dancer dream sort of grew. But the whole time I loved telling stories. And I loved being the entertainer. So I would, before I could write, I would draw all these pictures. And then I would staple these sheets together. And then I would make people sit down next to me, and I would go through the book and then tell them the story behind the pictures. And eventually, when I could write, I would start writing physically books. I remember writing like a true crime and when I was tiny and stapled it together. And I really, really loved telling stories. I would create my own little radio show with those old cassettes, because I'm very old, guys. I'm a dinosaur. Always loved telling stories. But then eventually, I didn't have a dance company or like a a dance school to sort of teach me how to become a dancer. So I mean, when I finally moved away, when I was about 19, it was obviously too late to be a dancer. And then I got into journalism and quickly into TV, first TV and then radio. And eventually I felt like I'd lost sort of all sense of grammar and punctuation and just, it was all in my mouth and not in the typewriter kind of thing. I'd lost the confidence of the skill of writing, really, until my husband lost it at the honeymoon when Liverpool was winning in the Champions League in Istanbul, and I decided I had to study the positive effects of football to be able to share my life with a football supporter that big and mad.
Just before we go on to that, so, I mean, you said you lost confidence initially in writing. Do you think that is something that's because it's like, in that line of work, say, it's something that you have to keep practicing and working on, otherwise it's not really like riding a bike, is it? So I suppose that's like any writer, whether it's music or stuff, you know, unless you're constantly doing it, I'm guessing you just lose that little bit of, maybe a bit of sharpness and as you say, confidence, don't you? And is that what you found by going into TV?
Yeah, it's like a two sides thing, because the good news is, if you are a good storyteller, if you have an interesting story to tell, if you have an imagination to tell good stories, if you are good orally with your words, and not even if you're good orally with your words, but if you have a great imagination, if you can sort of see these stories in you, you can train yourself to be a good author. I've said this to hundreds and hundreds of secondary school kids. If you have that imagination, or if you have that joy of telling a story, and even though your grammar is all over the place, don't worry, because when you work with a big publisher, they have proofwriters and they have editors, and they can tweak and polish and make that language shine. If you have an incredible story to tell. Yeah. So don't let that put you off if you're not very good at grammar. And in a way, it's really sad. You know, I've got a daughter now doing her GCSEs this year, and luckily she's a better writer than her author mom. so she's lucky like that. I think she's just a natural. But what I say to kids, what you need to do is read books with good language, because there are a lot of people who want to make it, you know, writing books or telling stories. I mean, just to get a good job, just to get the attention in like a job interview or in an audition, or if you want to pitch your dream project, you've got to sort of have the power of the words. And the power of the words you get from reading good writers. Mm-hmm. And if you don't really fancy reading books and you find it boring, read about something that you love. Yeah. Read about your passion. And that's probably why I've made a lot of boys start to read with my 6 Liverpool books, because I've written about something they really love. But I've written it in a professional storytelling way, not by just bombarding them with boring facts like a lot of football literature out there is, to be honest. It's just quite dull, straightforward, sort of telling the facts, lots of glossy pictures. But if you can then mix that up with proper professional storytelling, then you're onto something. Mm. So what I say to these kids, read, because writing, to come back to your question, is like exercising your muscles. Yeah. If you want to write literature on a higher level and sort of go from writing as a hobby to writing books that get publicized and sold in thousands, you've got to have a sharp pen. And that pen isn't sharp by birth. Yeah. It's a result of reading tons of good books and then just practicing. And then like me, because I sort of write and then I run a hotel and I do motivational speaking and then I write again. So I keep coming back to writing, but I don't do it constantly. But if you are making books or if you are making music or if you have that dream in you, sort of live of your creative you, if it's painting or writing or making music, it's a matter of getting up in the morning. You can't sit there and wait till some inspiration hits you, the master story or that Picasso painting is falling into your head. That comes into your mind from you constantly putting aside X amount of hours a day from the morning and just work.
Yeah.
And don't say, oh, well, but I'm more creative at night, after midnight. Rubbish. You're not. Well, do extra work then. But you have to get up in the morning when your body and your mind is actually at its sharpest.
Yeah.
And just do it. And write 20, 40 rubbish songs or rubbish book pages. And all of a sudden, it just comes.
Yeah.
When your muscles are warm.
That Jade said the same thing. She said from when it's a lot more difficult for her to sit down now and write a song because she's not writing 3 or 4 a day, which she used to be doing. And I think that's the difference between, say, her, someone like Taylor Swift, who's a renowned writer, but she'll sit and bang 5 songs out a day religiously.
Yeah.
Just bang, bang, bang.
And she'll pick out 1 out of 50.
Yeah.
And sometimes she will write, Taylor Swift can write 5 hits in a day. And then maybe 5 months later,
Exactly.
the next one will come out. But in that process, there is a lot of songwriting.
Yeah.
Warming and toning those muscles.
Mm. So Istanbul, you're on your honeymoon.
It's 20 years ago, I've been married for 20 years
Wow.
this year. You know how we all have some moments in life that are so defining. They can be traumatic, extremely joyful, very sad, super scary, or traumatic positively or negatively. You can have a positive trauma, by the way. Incidents in your life that will forever change who you are, either by the way you think or choices you make. And my moments, I've had a few, but this one is like work-wise, one of those traumatic moments that made me quit my job as a presenter of my own radio show at the national radio and made me start writing books about football, something I hated at the time. Yeah, it's just one of those.
So what actually happened?
So Liverpool, as we all know, made it to the final in 2005, and that was quite surprising to defend my dear husband, Jostein, because he was an avid Red, but I didn't realize he was quite a successful guitarist, and at the same time building up his first recording studio in Trondheim, where we lived in Norway. So he was so busy. He was either touring, he toured lots with his band, both in Norway and in Europe. And when he didn't tour, he was always in the studio recording other bands or artists. So there was always a record. So he didn't really Liverpool Football Club didn't take up any space as I was concerned in his life. Obviously, he was following it, barely online at the time because you were so old. I mean, you could follow it online, of course, but you know what I mean. It wasn't like now when you can stream everything. But every now and then he went to the pub and saw a game. But then I just thought, he was just catching up with his mates. And he once went to Liverpool and saw a game for the first time ever while we were together, because a friend, a band, like a famous singer-songwriter in Norway, won these tickets and took him with him. So I didn't think much of it. So then when we flew to Tobago, he was not very happy because he happened to have booked the honeymoon on the day of the final in Istanbul. And it was the first time in 20 years. And we've been married a long time. So 20 years is a long time to wait for a Champions League final for your favorite team. And it's, we all know it's the biggest scene in the world of football, for club football. And to be fair, with that Rafa team, no one thought they would make it to the final because they didn't do very well in the league that year. But they made it to the final, and he was so moody when he realized he couldn't see the game. And I was expecting like 1,000 kisses in the air at least, on our big honeymoon. I'd always dreamt of going to the Caribbean. And he'd booked that last minute, and not last minute enough though, because he then wouldn't have booked it on a Wednesday. But he had recorded an album with his band just before the wedding on that Saturday before. So he just wanted a little buffer in case there was something on the guitars he had to fix because they were mixing the album while he was away. There's always an album in our lives. Yeah. So he couldn't blame anyone else. He booked that honeymoon, and he was so grumpy, flying all the way over there, crossing that big ocean and time zones. And so we were just completely confused when we landed to change flights in Isla Margarita outside of Venezuela. And the game started live on this shabby little TV in this tiny little pub in the airport. Tiny airport. It was just, you couldn't write it. He was so grumpy of missing that. And then it started. And he got to see the first half, and he went from grumpy to unrecognizably grumpy. He was first to board a plane. But then as we were boarding, 3 goals obviously rolled in. He could have seen them live if he wasn't, live on TV obviously, if he wasn't that grumpy and had left the pub. And then he wanted to go out again. He went out again and said, I can't fly on this flight. I'm like, you gotta be kidding me. He's like, no, I need to see the second half. It was 3-3 in Istanbul, and I'm like, no. But then he came in. I just sat in the plane. I thought, well then, we'll just have to go off. I'm going to Tobago with or without him, honeymoon or not. We spent all our money on this massive wedding and this honeymoon. There was no more extra sort of fun cash to just buy new tickets last minute from some random island. And there wasn't a flight in 3 days. You had to come on. And then, we landed when it was a penalty shootout, and he got that penalty shootout delivered over a phone from a friend. And he just basically lost the plot in that airport. I'd never seen him like that. He's such a calm, together guy. And then he was just completely animated. And he almost got arrested because it was so loud and seemed quite aggressive. Especially when Riise missed there, it was mad. And then when we won, he was literally sliding on his knees on the airport floor. And I thought, who is that idiot I've just married? And it was just too late. And it was like a point of no return. So I thought, if you can't beat them, join them. I just need to find out, what is this giving him? What are the positive sides of football? Because in the media at that time, and that's probably why I wasn't too fond of football, the only people they would expose were drunk, overweight, middle-aged men, aggressive men. And that was sort of the image for us who didn't follow football. So I discovered the world of supporters were a lot more than that. And eventually I fell in love with football and Liverpool and the supporters. Mm-hmm. That was a work accident. Wasn't supposed to happen.
Tell me about, is it Jan? Do I pronounce that correctly?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So one of the first things that made me really sort of see that football was so much more than just football, and was so much more than my stereotypical perception of football, was when I was writing this book. I made a documentary first, which was called "You'll Never Walk Alone," but in Norwegian, "You Will Never Walk Alone." It was called in Norwegian. It was on the national radio as well. But to find my main characters, I asked people to to write to me and tell me what their best or strongest Liverpool moment was and why they loved Liverpool, why Liverpool Football Club was so special. So I could find someone who could tell that story in pictures, because, when you are doing radio documentary, you can't sort of hide yourself behind glossy pictures. You have to have characters in it who present those pictures. Yeah. So I didn't expect what sort of stories I would get. I was just looking for a good storyteller. I thought it was all going to be nerdy stories about some boring football games. And then I got over 400 stories sent to me. I must have triggered something in people. I got over 400 stories in my mailbox, and they made me cry and laugh, and they just absolutely blew me away, because they showed me that I had taken completely wrong in terms of what football is. Because Liverpool Football Club was just a red thread through all these people's lives, but these were stories about hope, love, identity, illness, losing children, bullying, empathy, passion. I got stories sent from drug addicts who are on the dole, to ministers in the government, and everyone in between. And so many women, grandmothers up from the north, and rock stars down from the south, and all age groups. It was unbelievable. And I just realized, oof, there is a story to tell here. I immediately knew I had to write a book, because I could not fit all that into a documentary. And the stories were so powerful, they all deserved to shine. And one of those stories really, really blew my mind. And it was a story from a guy called Jan. He told me that he'd fallen in love with Liverpool when he was little and saw Kevin Keegan play on our TVs, because Norway got live games broadcasted already in the 70s. Unbelievable. Every Saturday when you had your 3:00 kickoffs, one game was sent live from England. And this was something Danish television, Swedish television, and Norwegian television got together and did. And then they had like a betting coupon. So you had like a national betting. And then the money went to good causes like non-profit organizations and building sports teams, kids football, like grassroots sports, basically. And all other kind of betting was and still is illegal in Norway. So they created this buzz around betting, basically fundraising betting. Mm-hmm. But you betted on the results of English football teams in that round, playing at the same time. And one of the games were always live, and the other games, 12 of them at the time, every time, the other results would come bling in the corner of the TV every time there was a goal. And Jan saw Kevin Keegan on that in his own living room. You didn't have to pay, because it was the only thing we had on TV. It wasn't pay. Imagine how much it costs now to see football. I think we pay do we pay £120 a month just to Sky, and then you got everything else? Mad. So yeah, it was free and the only channel to watch. So it was football from England or nothing. And Jan just couldn't believe this mighty mouse with the ball glued to his legs. And he came to school and said, I've got a football team in England now, because everyone had a team on paper, whether you liked it or not. It was just this thing. Every school kid in Norway had a favorite team in England. And the kids said, no, you're not cool enough to follow Liverpool. You should support Manchester City. So he had to be following Liverpool in secret. And the boys in his school were horrible to him. They bullied him, and they were beating him up on a daily basis from primary school. And they would take him and hit him with his head first into concrete walls. And they hurt him so much that he got this really bad epileptic disorder. So he couldn't work, he couldn't drive. He was really, really ill. And then when he into his 20s, it sort of stabilized a little bit, and then he got an operation that gave him a new life. He's still not well, but he's so much better. So he could drive again. He married, got 2 beautiful children, and asked himself, how could this happen to me in a public school? Where were the teachers? So he applied for compensation from the government and won, obviously. There was absolutely no shadow of a doubt. And for the money he got, he did something he'd always dreamt of doing but never been able to afford. And that was to travel to Liverpool and go to Anfield and see Liverpool play for the first time ever. And he brought with him his only friend growing up, a friend that was a bit younger than him, that he met in the Scouts, Øyvind. And Øyvind didn't care about football, but he knew how much Liverpool meant to Jan, so he came along. And both of them absolutely lost it in tears when they stood there and sang "You Never Walk Alone" alongside 40,000 plus others back in the days. The tears just, were running down Jan's face, and Øyvind, it was impossible not to fall in love with the club as well. It was really powerful. And when Jan wrote to me quite late in my process chasing stories, he said, I debated for so many months whether or not I should dare to tell you my story, because I haven't told it to anyone. Not even the kids knew anything. Barely his wife. So he opened up the letter to me by saying, Liverpool Football Club saved my life. And I said to him, you have to explain how a team in England can save a kid's life in the middle of Norway. How is that possible? And he said, when I went through all I went through in school, I just wanted to die. There was absolutely no safe space for me. And I felt completely lost, hated my life. But I couldn't let down the only thing and the only ones who made me happy, made me feel joy. So I had to live to see how Liverpool were getting on, basically. I needed to know if they were winning. I needed to support them because they dragged me through every week. So by telling his story, he won an award for the supporter union in Norway. I won an award for the best journalism with that book, and Jan won the award, the supporter of the year. And this was not just for Liverpool, it was for all the British supporter clubs in Norway. He got the award, supporter of the year. And then the biggest newspaper in Norway picked up on this and dedicated the front page to a huge picture of Jan and the words of "You Never Walk Alone" next to it. And what a payback time. I'm just thinking, at that time, that newspaper was on every shelf, in every shop, in every single corner shop, kiosk, you name it in Norway. Those guys who bullied him back then would have seen it. They could not have missed it for their lives. What a punch in the shame on you sector of your stomach to not bully other people, because it's just horrendous. And it's a story I've told to hundreds of schools to make people aware. And I encouraged Jan to set up his own supporters club, like a local branch, where he's still the head of the branch. He's made so many friends. And now he travels over almost yearly. We are obviously very close. He made me the honorable president or member or whatever it's called, which is really sweet. And I can't wait to go up there now and celebrate their anniversary later in the year, which will be really, really nice. And I'm bringing a big profile with me, a big player with me.
Oh, nice. Obviously, you've got this love of football, and then decided to basically emigrate to the UK, which is obviously a huge risk and scary, really. You know, as you said before, Josteyn's got a successful career over in Norway. You've got 2 young children, and you think, so what? We're just going to give it a go and open a hotel.
Yeah, it was quite scary. And also, you know, I was quite successful as a motivational speaker. I made really good money speaking in Norway. Doing that in England is like starting all over again.
Yeah.
You know, you go from $4,000 an hour to 10 pounds. Well, sometimes I get up, so I get a bit more. Obviously, it's picking up. But so we both sort of parked our careers and our dreams, really. Me, though, continuing my author dream, though, because I was releasing my Liverpool captain's book in English the same month as we moved over. So that was nice. But for my husband, you know, navigating in the British bureaucracy. Thank you, I can't say that. Yeah. And another thing with British people, you guys are so polite. And that's lovely. You know, every time we go home now, it's a bit of a shock to the system when you get a door in your face and no one says thank you and please. I'm like, oh, that's rude to my home people. But sometimes Brits are too polite, and especially in business, because in business you will say what you think the other part want to hear rather than be honest, just to be polite. So when you are not from Britain, it took us quite some time to read the language of business in England, because it's so different. In Norway, if you mean something, you say it. You're very straightforward, and sometimes that can maybe come across as a little bit too direct or maybe a little bit rude, but at the same time it's so much easier to navigate, and that's sort of the codes we have grown up, you know, working by. And then to set up a business in an environment where you have to sort of interpret everything. He says he wants to do that, but does he really want to do that, or is he just saying that to please me? And that was probably the biggest contrast. And then obviously all the paperwork and all the rounds and all the applications and all the waiting time. And the time from having an idea in England to seeing it through in life it's such a much longer timeline in the UK than it is in Norway, because of all these factors. And both my husband and I are quite sort of restless in a way. We want things done. We like to see projects through. We're not just throwing up all these ideas. We really want to land them and do them. So that was a huge challenge to learn to sort of adapt and navigate in this sort of terrain. So yeah, it was a big step. And also bringing children into the UK, you know, they didn't speak a word of English. And because you start school earlier in Britain, they had to jump over a year to catch up with their peers because you start so early. So for my son, for example, he came from year 4 in Norway and had to go straight into the final year of primary school with all the exams and everything in year 6, which was great because he's a footballer. So he just played his way into mates by being a good left footer, basically. So the first time a football was rolled out, he was sorted. And he played a little bit FIFA and stuff, so he had a bit more English sort of under his belt. But my daughter, she was only 7, so she'd only done 1 year of school. We don't do preschool. We don't, we start when we're 6. So she'd done 1 year of school. She'd just learned how to, put the letters together and read. She was still writing in capital letters. And she jumped over year 2 and started year 3 with her peers who'd done 4 years of schooling already. They were doing talking about 12 times she hadn't even started with the with multiplication, and it was fascinating to see how she would practically approach that, because it took her 3 months to be fluent in English, which is average for a child, which is fascinating how they soak in a language. In just 3 months they are fluent. And my kids are not unique. That's how kids are. You can put your kids to any language, country with any language, and within 3 months, if you let them go to a local school, they will speak the language in 3 months. It's mad because they're sponges. But before she got there, she would do the only thing she sort of could grasp. She would practice her handwriting. So go from capital letters to writing, join the letters together. And she would make us throw the multiple timetable at her several times a night, because she would just started from 1, went all the way up to 12 again and again and again, just to catch up on what she could before she could sort of catch up with everything else. It's great to see. It's quite inspirational to see how adaptable our kids are. We're so afraid of putting them through change. And the truth is, it's us as parents. We are such creatures of habits. So we bring our fear of change, whether we think we have fear of change or not, over to our children. But they can take anything on the chin, more or less. I mean, not everything, but you know what I mean. They are so flexible. So I'm really proud of them, because I mean, now they are completely bilingual, bicultural. I've got a son who had the choice now whether he wants to do university in Norway, where it's free, or if he wants to study and do the university in England. And he doesn't just want to do this university in England. He wants to study. So he's just been accepted to Liverpool University of Liverpool, because he wants to stay here. And then you've got my daughter, who's probably like 50-50 to where she wants to land. So we've created like a fleet that is maybe going to live in 2 different countries, but we can go back and forth. It's luckily not enough that long of a distance, but it is, it gives some sort of opportunities, lots of opportunities, but also it's going to make our family sort of branched out in different countries eventually. But right now we're here.
A couple of things that you're renowned for is obviously storytelling, but the ability to enable people to really just open up.
That's my X factor.
Yeah.
That's my little secret weapon. We all have X factors, though. We all have something we are really, really good at and more or less unique at. We all have something, a talent in there, and sometimes we just don't know about it yet. Sometimes we discover it by chance, but we all have something we are really, 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 really good at. And it's just a matter of giving ourselves the chance to explore and find that superpower, because we all have them. And for some reason, mine is to make quite famous, any people open up, which is really nice that I have that effect. I like my superpower. Yeah, it's nice just in life as well. I have some really interesting conversations all the time with randoms, with strangers, with friends of friends, with close friends, with family. Yeah, I'm lucky like that.
And I suppose you've almost come into, like say, an industry, to say, but football, with the majority of the questions they get asked is around football. So then you come along and you're speaking to them, and it's almost probably refreshing from their point of view, but then they're opening up to you because they've never sat in front of anybody before who's enabled them to do that, or to get the best out of them, or to enable to just open up, really. And you mentioned a couple before, Roy Evans and Paul Ince were 2 of the ones that you said really like opened up to you, didn't they, when you were doing?
Yeah, I mean, I've asked questions like, I remember I had this theory in my first book that football improves your memory. So I was also working alongside a professor in psychology. So we tested all these sort of theories, his theories about football to fans and players and former players. And one of the theories is that football is, because you are so full of emotions, so packed with emotions when you experience football, because you're such an avid, passionate fan or player, that will make a stronger mark in your memory. So this professor, he said to me that football is like fence poles through your memory lane, which I think is such a wonderful, beautiful picture. And for others, it could be something else but football. It could be wrestling, for all I know, or music. And I said to Phil Thompson, I said, Phil, in which way has football improved your memory? And he went, oh, I never thought of it like that. My wife is always going on about, how can you remember this, Phil? How can you remember that? Because my brain is just full of all these facts. And I've never thought that it's actually football and the passion behind it that's made me so able to remember so well, because you can hook a lot of your other life experiences to football, because you can think about a specific game when you were 10 and you think back to that game, and that game will then open up for the sensation of being 10 years old. Who were you when you were 10? What did you do that day? And that will gradually bring your memory and sensation back to that incredible specific memory of being 10. Or like one friend I've got in Norway who's got 4 kids. He's such a big red. So if he wants to remember how old his kids are, he thinks about a specific game that year when that child was born. And that way he will figure out how old they are now. And this is true.
Does his wife know that?
they are divorced. But not mentioning names. But it's fascinating though. So with Roy Evans, he was in Liverpool Football Club for 34 years. And he was quite heartbroken, the way he sort of had his exit from the club. He didn't really want to go, but Liverpool wanted to go European. Wanted to sort of facilitate for this more international approach and do better in the European competitions and all that. So and also having a dual management was never going to work. You need to have one manager. So Houllier took over. And Roy was quite heartbroken from that and didn't really give a lot of interviews, if many at all, afterwards. So many years later, I interviewed him, and I was really careful because I knew it was sensitive. So I kept turning on the recorder and I turned it off. But then he kept talking, so I had to turn it on again. So we kept doing that, turn off and on and off and on. And he was really open. And one of the questions I asked him was about memory. I was like, in what way do you think football has had an influence on your memory? And he was like, you've asked me questions I've never had in 34 years. I like this, I really want to help you. And he has been one of my greatest sources of support. He's opened so many doors, and we've traveled so much together, and we've had so much fun because he's such a warm, funny, fantastic guy. Everyone said, he was like the Mr. Nice Guy, but he's got some edge and wit, and he's got like this devilish sense of humor, and he can make you lay on the floor laughing, and he's got such a lovely family, and what a man. So we've worked a lot together, and he opened the doors for me to interview in later books so many of the big profiles who's never really shared their life stories before. So that was really special. And one of them was Paul Ince, who's another fantastic guy that I wasn't going to interview when I did my Liverpool captains. I decided to interview in depth all the major captains still alive, from Ron Yates all the way through to Steven Gerrard. And then Ince was such a united profile. I thought, it's not going to go down well in a Liverpool book. But then I thought, hang on a minute, he's got the key to, in terms of leadership and team building, what did Manchester United do different in that period when United took over the throne from Liverpool, and Liverpool had such a talented team with so many amazing players, and yet they just couldn't get better than third. What was going on? So I decided to interview Paul, and I was really grateful he said yes, not knowing he'd never shared his life story ever before at that point publicly. And his life story about, being abandoned by his dad when he was tiny, and then his mom when he was 10, she went to Germany to work and only took his little sister with him. So he was left in London with family. And to go from there and fight his way, literally fight his way, drink and fight, and then play for West Ham. And how he went from that, once he made himself sent off with a red card because his boots were just so full of holes, he had to just go into the away dressing room and steal a pair. And to go from that, always having someone who believed in you, Lyle in West Ham, and then Alex Ferguson in Manchester United. He actually failed the medical in Manchester. But Sir Alex, I have to say, no, not just guess. I mean, you can never sort of fault what he has done for football. Incredible that. And for someone to always believe in him, even though he was a troubled soul, and to go from that to be the first in modern time to captain the two biggest sides in British football history, to be the first black captain of England, be the first black Premier League manager. What a story. Unbelievable. What a man.
Has anyone actually made you nervous?
Yes, 2 people. The first one was Graham Souness. So scary. He was so scary. I met him in, was it Sunderland? I think it was, the airport there. They had like a meeting room where we were going to do this interview. And he was not giving anything free by the doors. He was like really testing me out to see if I knew my stuff before he gave anything away. I felt like on the edge, tested. And when he realized I was well prepared. Because I think when you are an outsider as well, and I was one of the first women, I was the first woman to write official books in Premier League. You have to be double prepared, because if I make a mistake as an outsider and a woman, a minority and a minority, then there's no leeway. So I had to be super prepared. And I am a maestro on mind maps. I never write down questions, because you've got to be present. You've got to listen, and you've got to ask questions alongside the conversation. You can't just map out all these stiff questions like you're doing now. I love it, because you haven't got any questions for me. You've got to run with the conversation, with the content, with the flow. That's how you make good interviews, by the way. And when he knew I knew my things, we had an incredible interview, but I was so nervous. We ended up making, because at the end of the Liverpool captain's book, I had all these fun shots to show that this wasn't just like a 5 minutes in some sort of doorway interview. These were in-depth, exclusive interviews. So I was arm wrestling in my picture with him. John Barnes was like carrying me like I was a dead princess. I was doing yoga with Kevin Keegan. I was making a heart in Melwood with Jamie Carragher. We must have got some stick for that, by the way. He was still a player at the time. I was like a fallen angel with Robbie Fowler with black halos. What else? I had a fake moustache and Rush had not got one. Stuff like that. So Souness and Steven Gerrard. Because I'm a late bloomer in football, so I fell in love with Liverpool around 2008. When he was obviously a massive, massive character in the team. And I spent 5 years trying to get an interview with him, because he's not very fond of journalists and I don't blame him, by the way. And he doesn't really do book interviews. I don't know if he started doing them recently. I don't think so. He does them for his own books, but that's about it. But yeah, when he finally said yes, thanks to the other captains and especially Jamie Carragher was a huge help for me then, a huge support. Cara came along to the interview as well. And that was just, yeah. I was so nervous because I just knew, you know, this is such a rare opportunity to ask questions on behalf of so many supporters who would love to hear his story, his captain story. So yeah, that was amazing, but a little scary. But I met Stephen a few years ago now at some charity dinner with Carragher, and I just walked straight into him because there was like this reception with drinks first. I just saw some bubbles in a glass, and yeah, I love my bubbles, I have to admit. So I just walked straight there. Didn't realize it was like a special sort of meetup with the VIPs before the event. I was supposed to go in a different door. I just didn't know. But the first one inside that door was Steven Gerrard, and he came right up to me before anyone realized, even myself, that I was in the wrong room. Kissed me, both sides, and then he said, "I loved your book." And I just thought, I can die happily now. I have done something in the world of football writing. I can retire now. I was floating on a little pink cloud again. Yeah.
So one final question for you.
Mm-hmm.
We talked earlier about Shankly and Klopp and the similarities between the two. Obviously, Shankly was before our time, but we've heard all the stories. But what would you say has made them unique?
The ability to see people, the ability to make everyone feel appreciated and valued, the ability to build a team where every single person in that team feels like they have an important job to do, no matter if they are a visual part of that team, a star factor, or the cleaner or the security or the canteen or whoever. And I think, you know, when I wrote my latest book now about Klopp's 9 seasons in Liverpool, I interviewed Martin Skirtle, and he told me how Klopp would make every single staff then in Melbourne, this was before AXA, walk through the room with players before they started. And afterwards, Jürgen said, "Do you know the name of all of these guys?" And Martin had been there for 7 years at the time, and he had to realize, you know, I know quite a few, but I don't know everyone's names. And Jürgen said, "I want you to learn all these names, because these are the guys who are working so hard behind the scenes to facilitate so you can do your job, which is to perform your utterly best on the pitch and in training." And I just think that is just such a beautiful way of kickstarting a new era.
Yeah.
And how I mean, come on, Jürgen even made the opposition, after they were absolutely hammered, line up for a hug. I mean, it says it all. What a man. Yeah, what a man.
It's definitely unique, wasn't he?
Yep.
So what's next?
Gosh, what's next? I need to see if I can get my Klopp book out in English. I just haven't had the time to work on that. Because it was too rushed to... I've done it before, written a book in 2 languages at the same time. It's hard.
Yeah.
Because there's so many little tweaks, and then you have to go back and do it in both versions at the same time. I'm never doing that again. And this time it was such a short space from... I finished my interviews until the book had to be in the bookshelves. That was tough. So I just haven't had the time to look into the English one yet, but it's the best book I've ever written. And I've never said that about any books before. This book is special. It's got so many stories that we can learn so much from, because he was a very special man and surrounded by some very special players, and we can learn so much from them. And I just want to send it to Jørgen. It's my love letter to him, basically, and he's not very good in Norwegian, is he? So for what it's worth, at least I have to do that. But I mean, I've got over 100,000 people following me on Instagram, and quite a few thousands of them are like, when do we get this book in English? Come on. So I've got to try to do that, but also continuing to build Hotel Tia. I mean, it is a meeting place for fans. We want to brand it to the rest of the world. We want to get some more local activity in there. It's a beautiful space, you know, a Victorian lounge, and just have more local activity in there, more big life events, really. And get some more corporate groups in there to do their meetings. We can do beautiful funerals and parties and that stuff, and also build more on corporate tours. Because we're now doing like a tour. We have got Bill Shankly's oldest granddaughter working for us now. We've headhunted her, Karen Gill, from Greece. So she's doing these beautiful Founders of Fame tours where she will take people in her granddad's footsteps, but also take people into the Beatles' footsteps. So you get a north-south tour, which is beautiful. And we do mural walks. So we just need to sort of build and do more. We want to do wine and food tours. We want to do tours and fill the hotel and our apartment hotel. Beautiful spaces and beautiful rooms up in Anfield Road, outside of the football as well. So upwards and onwards.
Watch this space.
Yep.
That's been an absolute pleasure. I can't believe it's gone so quick as well. So
I don't dare to look at the watch, but yeah.
So thank you. We'll put all the links to your social media and everything in. But thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.